The sun pressed down on a quiet roadside just outside a small forgotten town. Heat shimmered in the air, and the sound of cicadas filled the silence. A young girl, no older than 12, stood beside a rusty, half-broken bicycle. Her shoes were worn thin, and her loose oversized shirt slid off her narrow shoulders. She wiped dust from her face and looked up the empty road, her eyes holding both fear and hope. Far in the distance, the deep rumble of engines broke the stillness. A group of bikers rolled toward her. Black leather jackets, heavy boots, mirrored sunglasses. They looked rough and intimidating, the kind of men trouble followed. As they slowed near the girl, the leader removed his helmet. Behind him, sitting quietly on a black cruiser, was Steven Seagal. Calm, silent, watching every detail. The bikers exchanged curious glances. One of them muttered, "What is a kid doing out here alone with junk like that?" Another chuckled. "You trying to sell that thing?" The girl swallowed hard. Her lips trembled as she spoke softly. "Please buy my bike, sir. Mommy has not eaten for 2 days." Her words dropped into the air like a heavy weight. The laughter stopped at once. Even the engine seemed to quiet. Steven's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in focus. One biker muttered that she might be lying. Another said it could be a setup. Steven did not react. He studied the dirt on her cheeks and the way she gripped the handlebars as if they were all she had left. "Where is your mother?" he asked in his slow, steady voice. "At home. She is sick. We have nothing left. I just need to buy her food." The road fell silent again. Steven glanced at his group, then back at the girl. Her voice carried truth, fear, and pride all at once. For a moment no one spoke. Dust drifted across the road under the harsh afternoon sun. The girl kept her eyes on the ground. One young biker with tattoos on his neck gave a nervous laugh. "Kid, you really think we will buy that old thing?" She did not answer. Her grip only tightened. Steven remained silent behind his dark glasses. Another biker with a red scarf and heavy chain leaned forward. "Come on, sweetheart. You think we are rich? Your dad sent you to trick us." The girl shook her head fast. "I do not have a father. He died last year. Mommy got sick. I just want her to eat." Her voice cracked at the end. Even the cruelest biker felt it but tried to hide it. "Not our problem," he muttered. Steven finally spoke. "You said your mother has not eaten for 2 days. The girl nodded. "She says she is fine but she cannot stand. I tried to find work but nobody hires a little girl. I only have this bike. It still works. I will trade it for food. Anything." Steven studied her. Some bikers shifted uncomfortably. One whispered that it felt wrong. The leader scoffed and said it looked like a scam kids pull with hidden partners. Steven turned to him. "You think she is lying?" The leader shrugged. "Seen it before." Steven did not argue. He turned back to the girl. "What is your name?" "Lena. My mommy is Anna. Where do you live?" She pointed down a dirt stretch leading toward the hills. "Near the river in the old house. We used to have a small store." Her voice faded. Steven rose from his bike. "You will take us there." The others protested. Said they had no time. Steven answered calmly. "If she is lying we will deal with that. If she is not, then some of you need a reminder of what real men do." That silenced them. The leader sighed and agreed to 10 minutes. Lena looked stunned. Steven nodded once. "Lead the way." She climbed onto her bike and pedaled slowly. Her thin legs shook with effort but she kept moving. The bikers followed behind like distant thunder. They reached a broken house by a dry riverbed. Cracked walls. Sagging roof. Plastic over the windows. One chicken pecked at the dirt. Lena ran inside calling for her mother. Steven ducked under the low doorway. Inside the air was hot and stale. A thin woman lay on a mat. Pale and weak. She tried to smile at her daughter but failed. Steven knelt beside her. "Ma'am. I am Steven. Your daughter said you were not well." The woman whispered that Lena sold her father's bike. The last thing they owned. The bikers at the door fell silent. One removed his glasses. Another looked away in shame. Steven turned to them. "This is what you call the hustle." No one answered. "Bring all the food. Water. Everything." They obeyed without delay. Lena looked at Steven with tears in her eyes and thanked him. He gave a small nod. "Do not thank me yet. You showed us who we really are." Would you have believed her or thought it was a trap? Share where you are watching from in the comments. Inside the house, Lena wiped her mother's forehead. Outside, the bike engines shut down one by one. Steven noticed the empty shelves, broken fan, folded clothes, and total lack of supplies. "You said you had a store." Lena nodded and pointed to the doorway where a broken sign hung. Anna's corner shop. Stephen walked outside. The store had been stripped. He found faint tire tracks leading toward the road. This was no accident, one biker said. They took only food, medicine, and small goods, Stephen replied. They knew what they wanted. Lena said trucks came at night. The door was broken. Her mother was pushed down. One man laughed and said the desert belonged to them now. One biker shifted nervously. Stephen locked eyes on him. The man admitted it sounded like the Dust Vultures, a gang that raided small towns and sold goods in Ridgedale. Stephen looked back toward the house, then to his group. Mount up. We are going to Ridgedale. The leader hesitated. Stephen replied coldly. We will find out. As the sun dipped red across the sky, they rode out. Lena stood at the gate watching them leave. Ridgedale appeared ahead with neon lights and empty warehouses. Stephen ordered the group to split up and search for stolen supplies. He entered a run-down diner, ordered coffee, asked the waitress about stolen food and medicine. She warned him. The vultures do not like questions. Stephen set down his cup. I do not like thieves. At that moment, the men in the corner fell silent. One of them, a thick-armed biker wearing a red scarf, the same kind from Lena's story, slowly turned. You got a problem, old man? He said as he stood. Stephen remained still. Possibly. Depends where you were 2 nights ago. The man gave a crooked grin. You asking about that little shop? Stephen's expression hardened. You were there. Before the man could reply, Stephen moved faster than anyone could follow. In one motion, the biker's scarf was clenched in Stephen's hand and the man's face slammed against the counter. You think stealing from a hungry family makes you strong? Stephen said firmly. The other men rose, reaching for weapons. Stephen shifted slightly, his eyes sharp. Don't. They ignored him. Within seconds, the diner erupted into chaos. Fists flew. Chairs overturned. Glass shattered. The sound of impact echoed through the room. When it ended, only Stephen stood upright, breathing steady among the wreckage. He grabbed the scarfed man by the collar. Where's the rest of what you took? Warehouse, the man gasped. South end by the old rail yard. Stephen dropped him. Stay down. Back at the house, Lena sat beside her mother, watching the door. She didn't know if the stranger on the motorcycle would return, but she felt he would. And far away, under the dim lights of Ridgeville's rail yard, Stephen and his bikers prepared to recover everything that had been stolen. This was no longer about money. It was about justice. If you were in Stephen's place, would you go after the thieves or help the girl and walk away? Share your answer below. And tell us where you're watching from. The night settled heavily over Ridge. The city's noise faded, leaving only distant dogs and flickering streetlights. The rail yard sat at the southern edge, rusted metal, broken rail cars, and deep shadows hiding unknown dangers. Steven Seagal and his bikers rolled in quietly, headlights dim. The air smelled of oil and smoke. Nearby, voices echoed, men laughing, crates being moved. Stephen raised a hand. Silence. The bikers shut off their engines. The night went still again. They moved forward on foot, boots crunching on gravel. Around the corner of an old warehouse they saw it, stacks of stolen goods. Boxes marked with brand names, medicine, canned food. And on top sat a familiar wooden crate with faded words, Anna's Corner Shop. Stephen's jaw tightened. That's it. Inside, about 8 men counted cash under dull yellow lights. Their leader lounged in a chair, tall and muscular, a deep scar across his neck. He laughed loudly, the same laugh Lena had described. Dust vultures, one biker whispered. That's them. Stephen stepped into the open, calm but firm. You took something that doesn't belong to you. The laughter stopped. The scarred man looked up. And who are you supposed to be? Someone you shouldn't have stolen from, Stephen replied. The man smirked. And what are you going to do about it? Stephen said nothing. He walked forward. His boots echoed through the warehouse like a clock counting down. The dust vultures spread out around him. One pulled a knife. Another raised a pistol. Stephen remained calm. I don't want to fight, he said. I just want the supplies returned. There's a sick woman and a little girl waiting. The scarred man laughed again, the same cruel laugh that haunted Lena. You mean that shack by the highway? We cleared that place clean. The woman should have stayed out of the way. That was all Stephen needed. He moved in a blur. Before the nearest man could raise his gun, Stephen had already disarmed him and sent him crashing into the wall. Another lunged. Stephen shifted and drove an elbow into his ribs. The sound echoed. The bikers stormed in from behind. Shouts filled the warehouse. The scene exploded into chaos. Steven's movements were precise and controlled. Every strike was measured. Every counter exact. One by one, the dust vultures fell, their confidence fading under the calm force of a man driven by justice, not revenge. At last, only the scarred leader remained. He stumbled back and pulled a hidden revolver. "You don't scare me, old man." Steven stepped closer. "You should be scared of what you've become." The man fired. Steven deflected the gun. The shot shattered a light overhead. Darkness followed, then footsteps and a heavy thud. When the light flickered on, the leader lay on the floor groaning, his crushed gun beside him. Steven leaned down. "You're taking every box back to that family. And you're doing it yourself." The man spat. "Why would I?" Steven lifted him slightly by the collar. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure this desert remembers your name for all the wrong reasons." The man froze, then nodded. "Okay. Okay." Steven stood and looked around. His men began loading the crates. It was over. By sunrise, trucks rolled down the highway toward Lena's home. The sky turned gold. Lena stood outside as the first truck stopped and men unloaded box after box. Her mother, weak but sitting by the door, covered her mouth in disbelief. "Lena, what is all this?" Through tears, Lena smiled. "The man on the motorcycle. He came back." Steven stepped forward. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "Just promise you'll never give up." Her mother nodded through tears. "We can't thank you enough." Steven shook his head. "Don't thank me. Help the next person who needs it." As he turned to leave, Lena ran up and hugged him tightly. "Thank you for believing me." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You told the truth. Stay brave." He mounted his motorcycle. The engine roared. Dust lifted as the convoy left toward the horizon. Lena watched until the sound vanished. She looked at the old, scratched bike she once tried to sell, now parked beside crates full of food. "Mommy," she whispered, "he didn't buy the bike but he gave us everything back." Her mother smiled weakly. "Sometimes God sends angels in leather jackets." Lena giggled softly. "Or maybe sunglasses." That day, the story of the girl, the bike and Steven Seagal spread through the towns like wildfire. Everyone who heard it learned that kindness, courage and justice never go out of style. If you believe no child should ever have to beg for food, type hope in the comments. And if you respect what Steven did, hit subscribe for more stories that restore faith in humanity. The morning after the supplies returned, peace finally settled over the small house. The empty shelves were filled again. Warm soup scented the air. Lena's mother sat up, weak but smiling. For the first time in weeks, Lena laughed freely. But Steven Seagal wasn't resting. He stood near his bike, checking his gear as the others loaded up. Something still felt wrong. The robbery had been too clean. Too organized for a random gang. The dust vultures usually targeted supply trucks or warehouses. Why a family shop? Steven turned to Jake, the biker leader. "Did you notice how the crates were marked?" Jake frowned. "Yeah. City codes. Shipping labels." "Exactly," Steven said. "That means someone guided them. Someone who knew what was inside." Jake's eyes widened. "An inside job?" Steven nodded. "Someone set that family up." He looked back at the house. Lena helped her mother sit by the door. Her small hands were full of hope. Steven knew he couldn't leave yet. By noon, Steven and Jake were back on the road, this time headed to Ridge's freight station. A large man in a faded uniform smoked by the entrance. He stiffened when Steven approached. "You again? You're the shipping foreman?" Steven asked calmly. The man nodded nervously. "Yeah. What do you want?" Steven showed him one of the marked crate labels. "You recognize this code?" The man hesitated. I can't talk about that." Steven stepped closer. "You will. That crate came from a family that nearly starved." Jake folded his arms. "You talk now or the cops dig through every record you've got." The man sighed and dropped his cigarette. "All right. Those goods weren't meant for her shop. The dust vultures didn't steal them. They were told to take them." "Told by who?" Steven asked. The man swallowed. "A businessman. Black SUV. Said the shop owed city money and was being reclaimed. He paid the gang to move fast and stay quiet." Steven's tone sharpened. "Name?" The man hesitated. "Grant. Thomas Grant. He owns Ridge Ale Supply Network." Jake muttered, "That explains everything. He's one of the richest men in the state." Steven replied quietly, "Then he's about to learn money doesn't buy mercy." That night, they reached a gated mansion on Ridge's edge. The air felt heavy before the storm. Steven parked and walked straight in. A guard tried to stop him. One precise movement and the guard was disarmed. Inside was glass and marble, nothing like Lena's dusty home. In the main hall, Thomas Grant sat on a leather couch, sipping whiskey and talking on his phone. He looked up. "Can I help you?" Steven stopped in front of him. "You're Thomas Grant." Grant nodded. "And you sent men to rob a family." Grant's smile faded. "I don't know what you mean." Steven placed the crate label on the table. "That was your shipment. You paid a gang to take food and medicine. You nearly killed a woman and her child." Grant stood, defensive. "That property was under repossession. I had the legal right." "There were no assets," Steven said coldly. "Only food. Only medicine." Grant sneered. "And? Collateral damage. Just business." Steven stepped forward. The tension in the room was heavy enough to feel. "You call it business," he said calmly. "I call it cruelty." Grant sneered. "You think you can threaten me? I own half this city." Steven's face stayed firm. "Then you should have learned how to own your conscience." He turned toward the door but stopped. "The people you hurt will get everything back. And you will make sure of it." Grant laughed coldly. "And why would I ever do that?" Steven leaned slightly closer, his voice steady and cold. "Because I already sent copies of your payment records to the press. By morning everyone in Ridgeville will know who you really are." Grant froze. His face drained of color. You cannot do that." Steven gave a faint smile. "Already did." He walked out of the mansion without another word. By dawn the story was everywhere. A powerful businessman exposed for exploiting small towns. Reporters surrounded Grant's estate. Police arrived within hours. His empire began to fall apart. Back in the small roadside town, Lena's mother received a letter from the local government with an apology and noticed that her shop was officially restored along with compensation. Lena held the letter with shining eyes. "Mommy, he did it." Her mother smiled. "Steven." Lena nodded. "He kept his promise." Far away, Steven sat on his motorcycle at sunrise watching the long road ahead. He needed no applause. He needed no thanks. Justice had been served quietly and completely. He put on his sunglasses, started the engine and rode toward the horizon. A lone figure making the world a little fairer, one small act at a time. If you believe justice always finds a way, type truth in the comments and tell us. If Steven had not stepped in, what do you think would have happened to Lena and her mother? Morning sunlight spread across the desert highway. The town, once forgotten, now stirred with energy. People arrived from nearby villages bringing food, medicine and clothes for Lena and her mother. What began as one simple act grew into something much larger. Within 24 hours, videos, photos and headlines spread rapidly across the internet. Hollywood star Steven Seagal confronts corrupt businessman. The little girl who sold her bike to feed her mother. A real-life hero rides again. Every social platform filled with the story. A short 30-second clip showed Steven beside Lena's broken bike saying calmly, "No child should ever have to beg to feed their family." That single sentence touched millions deeply. Reporters soon arrived in the town, cameras flashing, microphones raised, searching for Lena, her mother and Steven Seagal. But Steven was already gone. He did not stay for attention. After making sure the family was safe and the shop restored, he quietly left, riding toward the open road. Jake and the other bikers stayed behind, helping repair the shop's wooden roof. Tough riders had become humble workers, hammering boards and painting signs. As Jake tightened a bolt, he looked at Lena and smiled. "You know, kid, you changed a lot of people." Lena tilted her head. "Me?" "Yes, you," Jake said. "You reminded us what real strength is. It is not fists or engines. It is heart." Her mother nodded softly, tears shining in her eyes. "And he reminded me that good men still exist." Meanwhile, in Ridgeville, the city fell into chaos. Thomas Grant's empire collapsed overnight. News revealed he had exploited dozens of small towns. He was arrested on fraud and extortion charges. The man who once mocked suffering now faced the same shame he caused. As one journalist said on live television, the story of Steven Seagal and the little girl did more than expose crime. It restored humanity in a world hungry for compassion. A week later, Steven appeared again in another small seaside town. He sat at a quiet cafe sipping tea, watching the waves. A young reporter approached him, nervously holding a recorder. "Mr. Seagal, people everywhere call you a hero. How does that feel?" Steven looked toward the horizon. His reply was simple and calm. "I'm no hero. The real heroes are the ones who fight quietly. The mothers who protect their children. The kids who never give up even when life pushes them down. I only gave a small push." The reporter smiled. What do you hope people learn from this? Steven turned to her, eyes steady. That respect and kindness are not weakness. They are the strongest power a person can carry. Back in Lena's town, the shop reopened officially. A new blue sign hung above the door. Lena and Anna's Corner. Hope lives here. People traveled for miles just to buy something and meet the little girl from the story. Lena did not see herself as famous. She only wanted to help others like her mother. Every night before closing, she placed a small bowl of food outside for anyone in need. Her mother would smile and whisper, "He taught us that giving is the greatest strength." Steven continued riding from town to town, always helping quietly, always leaving before cameras arrived. Sometimes the world does not need noise or fame. It only needs someone to stand when no one else will. Months later, a final video appeared online. A blurry phone clip showed Steven stopping on another dusty road to help a stranded truck driver. It went viral again within hours. The comments flooded in. "This man's heart is steel and gold. Faith in humanity restored." If everyone acted like Steven, the world would be unrecognizable. Steven never replied. He did not need to. The message had already reached its place. The camera returns to Lena standing outside her shop at sunset. She looks at the sky and whispers, "Thank you, Steven." A soft wind lifts the old bike chain still hanging by the door. It jingles gently, a small reminder of how one brave act changed everything. Years passed. Seasons changed. The once struggling town now thrived. The dusty road was rebuilt. The market was alive again, full of laughter. On the corner stood the same shop, Lena and Anna's Corner. The blue sign had faded slightly, but its meaning had not. Each morning Lena opened the doors with the same smile she wore the day Steven helped her. She was no longer a little girl. She was now a young woman, strong, confident, and full of light. Her mother sat behind the counter, older but finally at peace. Life had been hard, but kindness carried them through. Every week travelers stopped to take photos. They asked, "Are you that Lena?" She laughed. "Yes, but this is not only my story now. It is ours." What happened years earlier did not just help one family. It sparked a movement. Across the country, hundreds of small communities rebuilt. People created hope corners, food stalls, and small shops that donated to those in need. Each carried a simple quote: "No child should ever have to beg to feed their family." Steven Seagal. The words became a global symbol of quiet strength. One afternoon, Lena received a letter from a film studio in Los Angeles. "We are producing a documentary on real stories that changed the world. We would like to feature you and the man who started it all." Lena smiled, but her eyes softened. Steven Seagal had disappeared years ago. No one knew where he went. Some said a monastery in Japan. Others believed he traveled quietly, helping wherever needed. Whatever the truth, Lena knew one thing. He never needed attention. She agreed to the film. When cameras rolled, she sat in the same shop, once broken, now restored. She told her story with gratitude, not tears. "I did not just meet a movie star that day. I met a man who reminded me that humanity is not lost. Sometimes the strongest people are the quiet ones who act without asking for thanks." The documentary aired worldwide, trending for days. Millions watched, shared, and reacted. Somewhere on a remote mountain road, Steven Seagal watched it too. He said nothing. He simply smiled, turned off the screen, put on his gloves, and started his motorcycle. The open road was enough for him. Back in town that night, Lena stood outside her shop looking at the stars. "You kept your promise, Steven. You changed the world one soul at a time." Her mother joined her and placed a shawl on her shoulders. "Kindness never dies," she said gently. "It travels." Lena nodded. "And maybe he is still out there, carrying it to someone who needs it next." They watched the horizon in silence. The old bike chain by the door jingled softly, just as it did the day everything changed. Where are you watching this from today? Do you believe small acts of kindness can still change the world like Steven did for Lena? Drop a comment if you believe good people still exist. And remember, heroes do not always wear capes. Sometimes they simply stop to buy a